Hey everybody, welcome. Coach here. Hey, this week we are talking about that troublesome little landscape area called the landscape median. That area between your sidewalk and the curb street area. Normally relegated to turf, which we will talk about. But hey, I'm glad you're here. We're going to learn a little something today, so let's get started. Hey, first, a little legalities. Got to tell you this because I don't want you to get in trouble. Make sure you know whose responsibility that street median landscape area out in front belongs to. Is it the city's responsibility? Is it your responsibility? Is it your HOA's responsibility? You need to know before you do any sort of plan of attack. Now, my experience has shown is ownership generally belongs to who waters it. Is it watered by your water? If it is, chances are it's your responsibility and you can kinda do what you want. If it's watered by the city or by the development, probably their responsibility. Good to know before you do anything. Now, the reason I'm talking about this problematic landscape area is because oftentimes this area kind of gets neglected after a few years. And when I say a few, I'm talking about 5, 10, and 20 years down the road. When it tends to get that curved, humpy mound look to it, with irrigation that doesn't quite cover things the way it should. Invasive grasses and weeds tend to fall into it, and the proverbial street tree may be overgrowing its area. Now, what do you do with it? How do you make it look good again? This generally requires the attack of a new renovation. Like we covered before, know who owns the area before you go doing it. It generally requires a killing or a removal of the turf that's there. A lowering by excavation means lowering it back down to the curb level and the sidewalk, renovating the sprinkler system that is in there, making sure that everything works correctly, and maybe doing a little bit of selective pruning of the tree, if there is one, that it's there. These particular areas can really look good again, but it takes a little bit of sweat equity to get there. Once you've lowered that area back down, you can renovate the area, update the irrigation, amend the soils, fertilize it, and put down some seed or sod. Strongly suggest, especially if you listen to this channel at all, I'm a sod guy, and instant lawn is a lot better than sitting around and waiting for it and having any wind or anything else blowing new weed seed in there. So go sod if you can. If you happen to be in a new development and everything has just been done, make sure you know what street tree has been planted. Just because it's out there in front of your home does not mean it was a correct selection to go in. And my experience has taught me through decades of working around street medians and other things that those trees can often be ashes, sycamores, maples, and the like. And they can outgrow a 4-foot wide, 30-foot long street median area really, really fast. And we've all seen the upheaved sidewalks and cities coming in and cutting roots and putting new sidewalk in, all the nightmares that can go along with that. So if you do have a tree that is going to get really big out there in the years to come, ask the city, ask the development, ask the HOA if there's other selections that you can select from. Something smaller, something less aggressive, something that can contain itself within that 4-foot space and that long, narrow strip. So let's assume that you can do something out there and you've attacked that area and you've been allowed to do a new tree. Before you get all done, try these little preemptive steps so that even whatever tree you're allowed to put in there, chances are it'll go down deep and not come up on the top, do all its watering right in and around your new turf. Try these steps. Try to find a root barrier. Root barrier is a plastic shield that you can sink along your sidewalk area and along the curb side and allow the roots not to come underneath the sidewalk, but to go deeper. And a way to get those roots to go deeper are with tree root wells. They look like this, and I really strongly suggest that you do the digging and setting of these wells, and then irrigate them with a couple of drippers or something from either a drip system or an offshoot of your irrigation that's out there. Now, turf is okay. There's nothing wrong with putting turf out there, provided that it's the right type of grass, it's in the right area. You have the materials, both tools and other things, to keep it up. But if you're putting in yourself, here's a little tip I'd like you to try to follow in order for it to look better longer. And that is, take the soil level that's there, try to take it down about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch down below the top levels of the curb and sidewalk. And why do I tell you that? Is because the soil of your sod area or your seed eventually is going to eat up that top half space, and your grass will sit in there nice and flush rather than being raised above grade, causing that hump eventually from root heave, either from the tree or from turf grass roots itself. So turf correctly installed is going to last you for years, and make sure that you take care of it just as much as you take care of your front lawn if you have one. Now let's move on to option number 2, one of my favorites and used to be kind of a trademark of my company. Those little medians out there can also be done creatively. They can be done with a lawnless approach. And when I say lawnless, there's no lawn in your front yard, and there's no lawn in the median either. What I used to do, and what kind of gained a little traction and a little reputation on a good way, was that I didn't put any lawn out there at all. I used what I called free-formed, free-poured cement stepping stones, strategically placed where car doors and people would be getting out. And I would form those stepping stones up. I'd get a 50 or a 60 or even an 80-pound bag of cement, and I would form it up probably about 2.5 inches thick minimum, which tells you how far down I had to excavate that median dirt level. And I would freeform and pour those things, firm them up nice, just playing patty cake with those things, smooth off the tops and the edges, and then I would embed a little bit of rebar or some chicken wire or even some reinforcing wire down inside so that it would firm it up and not crack on me. Water them down. I would come back the next day or maybe a couple days later, maybe let it sit for a weekend. Then I would come back and I would stain them. I would stain them in kind of an earth tony color. Then I would take all that excavated dirt and I would put them back over. Now remember, the tops of the stepping stones were at grade. So the soil level I put in was just like about 1/2 inch below that. And I'd firm that down in. Now this soil is amended. I got some compost in it, some slow release fertilizer I would put in there and mix it all up. Put it back in, tamp it down with whatever tools I had at the time, and then I would water it in really good. And then I'd let it set the rest of the day and all night long. The next day I would come back and plant it, and I would plant it with ground cover instead of lawn. Most of the time I selected from 2 different ground covers. Some may work in your area, and other chances it may not. I used creeping thyme a lot, and the other one that I used was diamondia. Both of them were very low growing. They spread out, but in a controlled fashion, and they were maintainable. The diamondia especially was a little slower growing, so I planted it a little denser. And it had a nice yellow flower in the summertime, and it only got about 1 inch tall. These areas, coupled with the stepping stones, really stood out from the neighborhood. And plagiarism being the highest form of flattery, people started picking up on it and they started using it. Even my competitors. As a result, it allowed the homeowner to have a congruent type of landscape that went from a lawnless landscape in the front yard all the way out to the street median. And it looked like it went with each other. We didn't have a big front lawn and then a lawnless street median. No, lawnless kind of went on both sides. Then when visitors, guests, or even members of the family would pull up, they were able to get out very easily. They didn't have to walk across soft grass. They didn't have to walk across a moundy, hilly type of median, and they were able to walk across very easily. And usually my design kind of went in accordance where a front walkway came from the front door area and came out to the front sidewalk, so people were able to cross the median and go right up. They didn't have to hang a left and go up a driveway or hang a right and go up a driveway. They just had a nice path to meander up. Something else to consider. Okay, so we've talked about proper installation of turf. We've talked about a lawnless landscape of ground cover and stepping stones. Now let's talk about option number 3, and that's kind of a hybrid. It's a hybrid when we come in and we literally pave this median in about 3-foot strips in 1 or 2 areas. Pave it from the sidewalk to the curb. It can be concrete, it can be blocked pavers, it can be cheap stepping stones if you want to save a few bucks. But we do solid paving across there. Then in between we do either ground cover or we do turf, one or the other. It gives you a nice durable surface on which to cross. You don't have to look at anything. You just cross as if it was part of the sidewalk itself and then up to your home. Okay, let's do a little bonus one for you. Let's do option number 4. Now this really requires a lot of latitude from the neighborhood and the city, but we have seen them. I've seen them on Pinterest and other places where you can really go out there and landscape to your heart's content. I have seen those areas literally rototilled up and veggie gardens put in. I have seen strawberry beds coast to coast. I have seen tall sunflower seeds, perennials, and bulbs. I've seen it all when it comes to that median area. And if you have that kind of horticultural prowess, you have that kind of time to dedicate to it, and the ability and authority to go out and do that kind of stuff, then have at it. Go do it. To each their own. I don't particularly like things that are super tall there because, number one, it's a blocking of coming out of a driveway, but I've seen it, and in some cases, it looks okay. I think it's more relegated to more rural areas, maybe without sidewalks and pavement, that kind of stuff. But you do what you want to do. So let's review really quick. We have proper installation of renovating and installing a nice new turf area out there. We have looked for and have identified, researched, and understand what kind of street trees we are talking about out there, and are they going to work for you full time. And my favorite, go lawnless. Go out there with some free-form stepping stones, get creative, and put in ground cover in between. Make it a really interesting area. And number 4, do a perennial garden out there. I suggest using things that are 2 feet and lower. I really do. I think they look better. And just as a bonus, don't forget the old stepping stone, landscape fabric, and gravel. Gravel in the form where you can probably put pavers and other things, kind of like that hybrid idea. Put gravel in between. Put a drip system on the street tree out there so it gets a good deep soaking all the time. And there you go. No maintenance at all. Something to think about. Yeah, that peculiar little street median area. Some people like it, some people hate it, and some people just ignore it. But you, being a responsible homeowner, you need to pay attention to it out there. It's a reflection of your property if it is, still your responsibility. So make sure you take care of it. Make sure it always looks good. That's what I have for you. A little bit of shorter version today. I've learned a long time ago I'm not going to please everybody. So there was some yak, yak, yak to the commenter that came on this past week. Yak, yak, yak. And there was also a lot of education as well. If you did get some value, hey, do me a favor. Lightly touch, not in a creepy way, lightly touch that like button and consider subscribing. We really would like to get to 10,000 this year. And only by your help will we achieve that goal. A lot of you out there watch the channel, but you don't subscribe. So help an old retired landscaper out and hit the subscribe button. Come back and visit once in a while. I'd greatly appreciate it. Hey, don't forget the website, youryardcoach.com, for the book and the course and the very inexpensive DIY landscape checklist. Amazon page is always there as well. I sure do appreciate it. If you lasted this long, maybe I'll see you next week, every Friday. For now, as always, to your landscape success, I will see you next week. Bye for now.